In the Vietnamese name below, Nguyen Phuc is the surname. Bảo Đại, born Nguyen Phuc Vĩnh Thụy, was the 13th and final emperor of the Nguyen dynasty, which was the last ruling family of Vietnam. From 1926 to 1945, he was emperor of Annam. During this period, Annam was a protectorate within French Indochina, covering the central two-thirds of the present-day Vietnam. Bảo Đại ascended the throne in 1932. The Japanese ousted the Vichy French administration in March 1945 and then ruled through Bảo Đại. At this time, he renamed his country Vietnam. He abdicated in August 1945 when Japan surrendered. From 1949 until 1955, Bảo Đại was the chief of state of the state of Vietnam. Bảo Đại was criticized for being too closely associated with France and spending much of his time outside of Vietnam. Prime Minister Ngo Dinh Diem eventually ousted him in a fraudulent referendum vote in 1955. It has been widely held that Viet Minh Ho Chi Minh founded the independent Democratic Republic of Vietnam alone. However, Stanley Carnot in Vietnam, a history argued that nothing has reinforced the Viet Minhos more than the mercurial Bảo Đại decision to abdicate. His gesture conferred the mandate of heaven on Ho, giving him the legitimacy that, in Vietnamese eyes, had traditionally resided in the emperor. Early life. Bảo Đại was born Prince Nguyen Phuc Vĩnh Thụy in the palace of Don Trang Vien, part of the compound of the Purple Forbidden City in Hue, the capital of Vietnam. He later was given the name Nguyen Vĩnh Thụy. His father was Emperor Khai Thin of Annam. His mother was the emperor's second wife, Tu Kung, who was renamed Don Huy upon her 1913 marriage. She held various titles over the years that indicated her advancing rank as a favored consort until she eventually became Empress Dowager in 1933. Vietnam had been ruled from Hue by the Nguyen dynasty since 1802. The French government, which took control of the region in the late 19th century, split Vietnam into three areas: the protectorates of Annam and Tonkin and the colony of Cochinchina. The Nguyen dynasty was given nominal rule of Annam. At the age of 9, Prince Nguyen Phuc Vĩnh Thụy was sent to France to be educated at the Lycée Condorcet and, later, the Paris Institute of Political Studies. In 1926 he was made the emperor after his father's death and took the name Bảo Đại. He did not ascend to the throne given his age and returned to France to continue his studies. Marriages. On the 20th of March 1934, aged 20, at the imperial city of Hue, Bảo Đại married Marie-Thérèse Nguyen Huthi Lan, a commoner from a wealthy Vietnamese Roman Catholic family. She was subsequently given the name Nam.From. The couple had 5 children: Crown Prince Bao Long, Princess Phong Mai, Princess Phong Lian, Princess Phong Dung, and Prince Bao Thang. She was granted the title of Empress in 1945. Bảo Đại had 5 other wives, 3 of whom he wed during his marriage to Nam.From, La Thi Phan, a distant cousin, whom he married c. 1935, and by whom he had 1 daughter and 1 son, Princess Phong Min and Prince Bao An Hoang, a Chinese woman, whom he married in 1946, Bui Mong Thiep, whom he married in 1955 and by whom he had 3 children, Princess Phong Thao, Bao Hoang, and Bao Sun. Christiane Bloch Carsonac, during the period of 1957 to 1970. The last child was Patrick Edouard Bloch. Monique Bourdot, a French citizen whom he married in 1972 and who was styled Imperial Princess and renamed Monique Vĩnh Thụy. One of his concubines was a dancer from Hanoi, Lai La Ha. independence and abdication. In 1940, during the Second World War, coinciding with their ally Germany's invasion of France, the Japanese invaded French Indochina. While they did not eject the French colonial administration, the occupation authorities directed policy from behind the scenes in a parallel of Vichy France. The Japanese promised not to interfere with the court at Hue, but in 1945, after ousting the French, coerced Bảo Đại into declaring Vietnamese independence from France as a member of Japan's Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. The country then became the Empire of Vietnam. The Japanese had a Vietnamese pretender, Prince Surnth, waiting to take power in case the new emperor's elimination was required. Japan surrendered to the Allies in August 1945, and the Viet Minh under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh aimed to take power in a free Vietnam. Due to his recent Japanese associations, Ho was able to persuade Bảo Đại to abdicate on 25 August 1945, handing power over to the Viet Minh, an event which greatly enhanced Ho's legitimacy in the eyes of the Vietnamese people. Bảo Đại was appointed Supreme Advisor to Ho's Democratic Republic of Vietnam in Hanoi, which asserted its independence on 2 September 1945, but was ousted by the French in November 1946. Return to power and Indochina War. As Vietnam descended into armed conflict, rival factions clashed with each other and also with the remaining French. Bảo Đại left Vietnam after a year in his advisory role, living in both Hong Kong and China. The French persuaded him to return in 1949 to serve as head of state, not as emperor. He soon returned to France, however, and showed little interest in the affairs of his own country when his own personal interests were not directly involved. The communist victory in China in 1949 led to a revival of the fortunes of the Viet Minh. The United States extended diplomatic recognition to Bảo Đại government in March 1950. Soon after, communist nations recognized Ho's government. The outbreak of the Korean War in June led to U.S. military aid and active support of the French war effort in Indochina, now seen as anti-communist rather than colonialist. But the war between the French colonial forces and the Viet Minh continued, ending in 1954 shortly after a major victory for the Viet Minh at Dien Bien Phu. The 1954 peace deal between the French and the Viet Minh, known as the Geneva Accords, involved a partition of the country into northern and southern zones. Bảo Đại moved to Paris, but remained head of state of South Vietnam, appointing Ngo Dinh Diem as his prime minister. Second removal from power. In 1955, Diem called for a referendum to remove Bảo Đại and establish a republic with Diem as president. The campaign leading up to the referendum was punctuated by personal attacks against the former emperor. His supporters had no way to refute them, as campaigning for Bảo Đại was forbidden. The October 23 referendum was widely reckoned as fraudulent, showing an implausible 98% in favor of a republic. As it turned out, the official results showed that the total number of votes for a republic exceeded the total number of registered voters by some 380,000, an obvious sign of fraud. Life in exile. In 1957, during his visit to Alsace region, he met Christiane Bloch-Carsenac, with whom he had an affair for several years. This relationship gave birth to his last child, Patrick Edward Bloch, who still lives in Alsace in France. In 1972, Bảo Đại issued a public statement from exile, appealing to the Vietnamese people for national reconciliation, stating, The time has come to put an end to the fratricidal war and to recover at last peace and accord. At times, Bảo maintained residence in southern France, and in particular in Monaco, where he sailed often on his private yacht, one of the largest in Monte Carlo harbor. He still reportedly held great influence among local political figures in the Quang Tri and Trois Thien provinces of Hue. The Communist government of North Vietnam sent representatives to France hoping that Bảo Đại would become a member of a coalition government which might reunite Vietnam, in the hope of attracting his supporters in the regions wherein he still held influence. As a result of these meetings, Bảo Đại publicly spoke out against the presence of American troops on the territory of South Vietnam, and he criticized President Nguyen Van Thieu's regime in South Vietnam. He called for all political factions to create a free, neutral, peace-loving government which would resolve the tense situation that had taken form in the country. In 1982, Bảo Đại, his wife Monique, and other members of the former imperial family of Vietnam visited the United States. His agenda was to oversee and bless Buddhist and Khaedist religious ceremonies in the Californian and Texan Vietnamese American communities. Throughout Bảo Đại life in both Vietnam and in France, he remained unpopular among the Vietnamese populace as he was considered a political puppet for the French colonialist regime, for lacking any form of political power, and for his cooperation with the French and for his pro-French ideals. The former emperor clarified, however, that his reign was always a constant battle and a balance between preserving the monarchy and the integrity of the nation versus fealty to the French authorities. Ultimately, power devolved away from his person and into ideological camps, and in the face of Diem's underestimated influences on factions within the empire. Death. Bảo Đại died in a military hospital in Paris, France, on the 30th of July 1997. He was interred in the Cimetière de Passy. After his death, his eldest son, Crown Prince Bảo Long, inherited the position of head of the Nguyen dynasty. In popular culture, Bảo Đại was portrayed by actor Hai Nh2n in the 2004 Vietnamese mini-series Ngon Hoang Cung. Bảo Đại coins. The last cash coin ever produced in the world bears the name of Bảo Đại in Chinese characters. There are three types of this coin: large cast piece with 10 van inscription on the reverse, medium cast piece with no reverse inscription, and small struck piece. All were issued in 1933. Quotes. In 1945, when the Japanese colonel in charge of the Hue garrison told Bảo Đại that he had taken measures ensuring the security of the imperial palace and those within it against a possible Viet Minh coup, Bảo Đại dismissed the protection, declaring, "I do not wish a foreign army to spill the blood of my people." He explained his abdication in 1945, saying, "I would prefer to be a citizen of an independent country rather than emperor of an enslaved one." When after World War II, France attempted to counter Ho Chi Minh's popularity and gain the support of the U.S. by creating a puppet government with him, he said, "What they call a Bảo Đại solution turns out to be just a French solution." In a rare public statement from France in 1972, Bảo Đại appealed to the people of Vietnam for national reconciliation, saying, "The time has come to put an end to the fratricidal war and to recover at last peace and accord." Remarks. Throughout the course of Vietnam's history, Emperor Bảo Đại remains one of the most controversial political figures. This is due to the nature of the power struggles during his time, where true history was written and rewritten with political agenda. It is rather difficult to find a true, neutral view on Bảo Đại. Most of the texts that documented Bảo Đại used in some of the reading material above are rather biased, and one one-sided and based on other sources that are biased and one-sided. Before finishing this article, readers should consider a few things: independence and abdication. Bảo Đại was a victim of a war political propaganda that was created by both the Vietnamese Communists and Ngo Dinh Diem's fraudulent campaign to tarnish his political influence while enhancing their own legitimacy to power. Bảo Đại was an advocate of peace. He strongly believed in fighting for the independence his country using diplomacy. He did everything he could to keep Vietnam from falling into another bloodbath. After overthrowing the French, the Japanese offered Bảo Đại a chance to declare an independence Vietnam from the French. This offer was unconditional, according to Japanese Ambassador Yokoyama. While having some doubts at first, but Bảo Đại accepted this offer. Bảo Đại saw this as an opportunity to annul the effects of the French Protectorate Treaty signed in 1884, in which the colonial French promised to protect the emperor from any opposing forces. While the French had violated the treaty, there were still a number of bodies in France saw this as a traitorous act. Thus there was an anti-Bảo Đại sentiment among the French press and literature during that time. Vietnam was declared independent by Bảo Đại on March 11, 1945. He appointed Trn Trong Kim, a renowned Vietnamese historian, as government's new prime minister. Initially, the Japanese only returned the control of Trung Bo to the new government, but diplomatic attempts by Bảo Đại government at the Japanese had gained them the control of Bo and eventually Nam Bo in August 14, 1945, marking the complete unification of the country. It is also noteworthy that Bảo Đại new government did not immediately establishing a Ministry of Defense, deliberately, due to the fear that the Japanese might use it to fight the war and due to the fact that they required more time to build up the capacity of the future armed forces. The new Vietnamese governmental affairs were completely under the Vietnamese control. The government officials no longer have to report to the French and the Japanese. According to Frédéric Mitterrand's interview with Bảo Đại, which was aired on French national TV, the Japanese did request the new Vietnamese government to aid them in the war campaign. However, Bảo Đại refused, reasoning that now Vietnam is independent, no one can impose any demands on the independent Vietnam or her people. Following the Japanese surrender, according to Yalta and Potsdam agreements, the remaining Japanese military forces in Vietnam were to act as a security force and were not to be disarmed until the arrival of the Allies. On August 19, 1945, Viet Minh staged a revolt in Hanoi and successfully took over Bo. Around that time the Japanese force that garrisoned in Hue had already anticipated a possible Viet Minh's coup, and was ready to squash it. However, Bảo Đại ordered them to stand down, saying, "I do not wish a foreign army to spill the blood of my people." Bảo Đại abdicated on August 25, 1945. He explained in his own autobiography Le Dragon d'Annam, "They want a revolution. I will give them a revolution, but without bloodshed." Return to power and Indochina War. Vietnam descended into armed conflict due to two things: communism and the return of the French. At the time of the Viet Minh's August Revolution, the Vietnamese, including Bảo Đại himself, had very little knowledge of what communism was. In the beginning, the Vietnamese Communists disguised themselves as anti-French patriots to join with Vietnam Cach Mang Thong Minh Hoi, which was a faction originally consisted of non-communist patriots. They quickly gained control of the faction, either by persuading, threatening other patriotic members to join their communist party and through assassinations. They later changed the faction's name to Vietnam Thoc Lap Thong Minh Hoi, or Viet Minh in short. After his abdication, Bảo Đại agreed to serve as Ho Chi Minh's supreme advisor, due to the fact that he trusted trusted that Ho was a patriot, that he could bring back the stability to Vietnam with the support of the people as well as the Allies countries such as China, the United States, and France. Little did he know that he was being played into the communist propaganda machine. While working with Ho, Bảo Đại quickly realized that Ho Chi Minh only used his presence to gain legitimacy for Ho's newly formed interim government. He also met Vu Trong Khan, Ho's Minister of Justice. Through Vu, only then Bảo Đại realized that Ho was a communist. When the Chinese army arrived in Hanoi on September 9, 1945, assuming the role of disarming the Japanese remaining forces, they caused quite a ruckus for the Ho's interim government. On the one hand, the Chinese used the Vietnam Cuc Dan Thang to pitch against Ho's party, disrupting its operations in Ba region. On the other hand, they extorted Ho by challenging his legitimacy to lead the country. Fearing the situation might get out of control, Ho convinced the French to assume the Chinese's role instead. However, Ho also feared that inviting the French back into Ba might cause resentments in the rank of his followers and might even lose the supports of the people. He bribed the occupying Chinese. In return, they would force all of these shills opposing factions to join with Ho's government. This way, Viet Minh wouldn't have to take all the blame themselves when they sign with the French. Ho Chi Minh reasoned that to ensure that the Chinese keep their end of the bargain, Bảo Đại, now the supreme advisor, should to go to China to seek audience with Chiang Kai-shek in Chongqing. Bảo Đại refused at first but later requested to go along with the appointed delegation included 4 Viet Minh representatives and 2 Vietnam Cuc Dan Thang representatives. He was abandoned in China until further notice by Ho Chi Minh after meeting with Chiang Kai-shek without any money luggage. Ho left but a note urged him to stay in China because it would be more beneficial if he was not to come back to Hanoi. After staying in Chongqing for more than a month with the help of a few friends, he went to Shanghai and then Hong Kong. Collaboration. Collaboration, an ordinary word that we use to describe the action people of working together to produce or create something. But in any discussions about the time period of Vietnam, when used with Bảo Đại and only Bảo Đại, it suddenly means a degrading, traitorous act of atrocity. Not Go Thin Diem, not Ho Chi Minh, not any other patriotic leaders, just Bảo Đại. One can't help but wonder why. Was it because he took a jab at the American pride by accepting the offer that Japanese, an enemy of the U.S., presented to him to secure the independence of his country? Suddenly Bảo Đại, or anybody for that matter, became the collaborator, the traitor, the antagonist, because he shook hand with the enemy of the United States. Was this a standardized American view of him? But wait a minute, one might ask, wasn't the United States also an ally of the French, the enslaver of the Vietnamese people? Irony aside, how neutral is this American view of Bảo Đại? And what if he refused the Japanese offer? Would the propaganda headlines say, Bảo Đại, the French warden, denies his people of independence? What would any of us do in his place? Let us discuss about the relationship between the Japanese and Vietnam. The Japanese were seen as an enemy to many who wrote about Vietnam during this time period, and it usually stops there. But in fact, the involvement of the Japanese in Vietnam was much more complex than that. The ties between Vietnam and Japan can be dated back to many centuries ago. In the 17th century, the Japanese shogunate authorized the establishment of few Japanese trade towns in Fifo and Touraine, Annam. It was mostly trade relations until after the Meiji Restoration period. There was a movement called Minzoku Kaiho, which attempted to draw attention to the French Indochina. In 1874, Son, a Japanese first lieutenant, started Koeikai, which focused on establishing national policy guidelines toward Annam, in resentment to the aggression of the French toward the people of Annam. Many Vietnamese nationalists, including Phan Boi Chau, also looked to Japan as a country of interest. Many other nationalists, including Phan, also moved to Japan to study. The nationalist movements in Vietnam also received a reciprocal interest from the Japanese. When the Japanese military made its entry into the border of Tonkin, North Vietnam, in 1940, they brought along a number of Vietnamese nationalists who then organized a series of revolts against the French. It was the Japanese who helped facilitate many of the nationalist movements in Vietnam through the shell of many of the trade establishments such as Sawayama Trading Co., Taiwan Takushoku Co., etc. Many of the Vietnamese nationalists, some of whom were hunted by the French, came to the Japanese for shelter and assistances, including Thuong Bat Trak, Trn Trong Kim, Le Ton Nguyen Shan Ch Trn Van Lai, and most notable of all, Go Thin Diem. So, it is suffice to say, under the eyes of these Vietnamese nationalists, Japan was an ally to some, the saviors, and certainly to the Japanese themselves, the liberators. So then, why was Bảo singled out? And the Vietnamese communists, were they not part of the Comintern, an international faction? Was Ho Chi Minh not answering to the chair in Soviet Russia? Were Ho and his administration really nationalists when they denied the people the rights to freedom? How about Ho and China? Were Ho and his administration really nationalists when they blatantly declared that Spratly and Paracel Islands, which were under the control of the Republic of Vietnam, belonged to China? Honors. National honors. Sovereign and Grand Master of the Imperial Order of the Dragon of Annam. Sovereign and Grand Master of the Imperial Order of Merit of Annam. Foreign honors. Knight of the Most Illustrious Order of the Royal House of Chakri. Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Legion of Honor. Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Order of Cambodia. Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Million Elephants in the White Parasol. Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Crown. Knight Grand Cross of the Sharifian Order of Al-Alawi. Member First Class of the Royal Family Order of Johor. Ancestry.